by Scotty John. Scotty will be on mute to begin, just so that he can monitor the conversation for any questions or comments that you may have. As we've discussed before, this is an Ask Me Anything format. Anything that has to do with interviewing, careers, resumes, or otherwise is open game. The questions we'll cover have been texted in throughout the week, and then we'll also take your questions live. So this is my official invitation to you. If you are in a job search, or if you're considering your job search and you have questions, this is your opportunity to ask two Treasury recruiters. But again, the material doesn't have to be Treasury specific. So with that, while Scotty is getting set up, we will start with questions that had come in throughout the course of the week. And with that, the first question, and I'll wait for Scotty to go in here. Oh, there he is. How are you?
Doing well, thanks, Joe. I think we're all set. And like you said, please feel free. I just popped a comment in myself to say, let us know what questions. It's literally ask us anything.
Yep, it is an Ask Me Anything format, and this is, again, your official invitation to do so. So, Scotty, I'm going to start you off with a softball here. We got a text-in question that says, I've noticed a trend where many senior level roles have day-to-day responsibilities that are similar to an analyst. What do you recommend?
Yeah, I don't know if I can call that a softball, Joe.
It was tongue-in-cheek.
Well, so I think, okay, a few ways to take this. First of all, my understanding of the function is that, a treasurer is pretty much going to remain hands-on almost always. There's some exceptions. There's some extraordinarily large firms where maybe the treasurer's job is managing stakeholders and kind of, politicking, so to speak, a little bit more. But for the most part, this is even at the treasurer level, there's going to be some hands-on responsibilities. And from the conversations I've had with treasurers, Joe, you can tell me if you feel likewise. It seems as if that's, those are, that's welcome, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the leaders that we see in the treasury space, they want to be, and at least connected enough to kind of have a sense of what's going on. Of course, they trust their teams to report up to them when something is going on they need to be aware of, but it's just, it's kind of it's going to remain a hands-on role pretty much throughout your career. So I guess without a ton more context around the question itself, I'd say that's not uncommon and something you should probably expect. And if it's not something that you're interested in, then, you might want to think a little hard about whether or not this is the right career path, because again, it feels to me that most roles, regardless of the level inside of treasury, you're going to have some of that.
Yeah, and that's consistent with my answer too. A lot of effective leaders, it doesn't matter the industry, treasury, of course, being what we know and what we've done over at least the last year, you have to work your way up through the ranks so that you can lead your team effectively. You know what's happening behind, and basically behind the operations that are supporting you. You know how to support your team, and you know how to work through challenges that you're going to encounter. So that may be some of the reasons why you may see some of the more tactical responsibilities under job descriptions and whatnot. But at the same time, that's also why we will consistently preach focus on the role, the responsibilities, and the comp more so than the title, because a director at some companies may be a manager at others, or vice versa. And the other thing that you need to account for with this is you may be working with a canned job description. It may have just come out of an HRIS, a human resources information system, where no adjustments were made to the job prior to it being posted or advertised. That's why, another value or another opinion that we have is that you should or be open to conversation. Throw your hat in the ring, learn as much as you can about the role, and make that determination on whether or not it's right for you based on those conversations, more so than a job description or anything else, because all that's kind of subjective. And companies rarely get that right, at least from what we've seen when they go to advertise that type of stuff. So that would be my recommendation. Scotty, you look like you have something else you want to say.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. I do have two more things that come to mind as you're speaking about this. One, I just have to say, countless times I have spoken to people who were not interested in a role until they had a conversation, and they were completely surprised that it was a job they were absolutely interested in, and perhaps, like you mentioned, a little different than the job description kind of outline. And then number two, I think we're noticing a trend right now of whether it's manager. Generally, I'm thinking director is kind of the title, but it's the individual who will be tasked with coming in and building a treasury function from scratch. So you're, in essence, as a director of treasury, you are the treasurer, but you're also, the treasury analyst, the senior analyst, you know what I mean? It's like you're a team of one until you build your team out. So that is another trend we're noticing. Many companies, and we've been preaching this all, last year, basically, many companies have recognized that they missed the mark not having a dedicated function. And so you're seeing a lot of those start to pop up.
Yeah. And, good questions to ask along the way if you do get into the interview process is, where is the mismatch? Feel free to question that as you go through to try to learn more about it, because it could be something as simple, like I've talked to treasurers or HR professionals who didn't even realize that there were some things in their job descriptions that don't align with what they're looking for in the role. And it comes as a surprise to everyone. So as much as we try to go over these job descriptions and responsibilities with a fine tooth comb, sometimes I would advise against taking things at face value and really just going through the process and learning more about the opportunity yourself, and then determining whether or not it's the right fit for you, more so than just what you're going to see on paper.
Yeah. So on that note, and because we don't have any questions coming yet into the comment section here, I'm sure we have some more text in questions, but just, Joe, you and I had this experience last week, right? Where we were speaking to hiring managers who admitted freely to us that they weren't experts on this space. And, I guess the point of sharing that is that, that often is the case, right? That the hiring manager, whomever it might be, especially if it's somebody like in more of an accounting or finance function, FP&A function, they, oftentimes need some help and need some clarifying questions from the people that are coming in. And it's actually going to position you as a candidate much better to ask questions that help them clarify the role than it would for you just to kind of make assumptions. So I think just, note that from our experience, and especially just recent experience, it's so critical to, clarify and treat the role as if, again, to borrow a cliche here, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah, and you touched on an important piece there is, as companies are realizing that they need a dedicated treasury function, you're going to run into this more often than not. So that's something that you also need to account for as you get into the interview process, especially if you're coming from a mature and established treasury function, is you really, if you don't have that experience building something out or fighting those fights or those battles, so to speak, to get things, policies, processes, procedures set up and controls set up the right way. That's one of the things that if you have that experience, make sure you highlight that. But if you don't, that's something you really need to make sure that you can buckle down and be prepared to do if you were going to proceed with that position.
Absolutely.
So nothing else from the audience yet?
No, nothing from the audience. Again, good reminder to anybody watching here, please feel free if you have questions for us. It could be a question about anything recruitment related, does not have to be treasury specific. You've got two experienced recruiters here willing to, open the kimono, so to speak, and tell you candidly what we think about what you're experiencing out there. So feel free to take advantage of that. But I'm sure we have some more texts and questions, right, Joe?
We do. So I'm going to ask you this question. What should I do if I feel I'm a good fit for a role from a scope or responsibility standpoint, but I don't meet the years of experience?
Well, I think you should pursue it, is the short answer. Now, that being said, if you pursue it by simply applying to the job, as we've talked about in this platform before, likely what you'll have on the other end of that is an individual who doesn't necessarily, it depends, and I don't want to throw every corporate recruiting professional under the bus here, but likely it's an individual who is looking at, checking boxes. So when I say pursue it, I mean, not just, apply, but probably try to do a little research and network into the organization, try to find out who the hiring manager is, LinkedIn is such a great tool. We talked about this as well, but make them aware that you're interested. The way I would approach that outreach is just to say, believe I'm a great fit for this job, but I have to admit I don't have the years of experience. Do you have another opportunity perhaps that you think I'd be a good fit for? Something to that effect, to try to just get the conversation going.
Yeah, and even this goes back to the human resources information system, or where this job description is coming from too. Simply because I know one of the questions you and I often have with Treasury hiring leaders is, well, why do the years of experience matter? Why are they relevant? Because you can spend 10 years of experience only doing cash, say at a larger company like a Google or something, or you can have 5 years of experience at a smaller company where you're touching everything. And I would argue that the 5 years of experience are going to be more relevant than that 10 years of experience. If, say, for sake of argument, if there's like an 8 years of experience required, or something like that, it's really subjective, and it's important as recruiting professionals, whether you're third party like we are, whether you're on the in-house side, question why that years of experience requirement is there. It could be something around corporate environment, corporate bureaucracy, whatever it may be, where, our directors or our managers have to have at least 8 years of experience. If you can get in front of the interviewer or the decision maker, that is definitely a question I would ask. And I think you're taking the right approach with just being forthright and saying, hey, here's one area where I think I may be deficient, or that may be a sticking point. What do you think about this? Because that way you're almost setting yourself up. You're going to get some immediate feedback on whether or not you're going to be moved forward, or if that's going to be the sticking point with them, or if there's something else. So, like we've talked about before, with offering feedback, companies tend to shy away from it, but especially in writing. So anything you can do when you have someone who's right there face to face with you, try to get the answers that you can. And I'm 100% aligned with you that throw your hat in the ring, see what happens. The caution that I would throw out there, again, you do have to follow up with the decision maker or the recruiter, whomever it may be, and you really, really, really want to hone the bullet points on your resume to mirror and mimic the experience that they're looking for, because you can't afford to make any assumptions. You're already kind of playing from behind a little bit. If they are looking for that 8 years of experience and you only have 5, you're going to have to cover a lot of ground just with what's on the resume. So make that experience as relevant as you possibly can. Again, don't embellish it, but that's where your mindset's got to be. It's got to be almost, you have a lot of ground to come up with just judging on a piece of paper or on a resume. So you want to have your LinkedIn profile and your resume up to speed and aligned with what they're looking for.
Totally. And I think you and I have talked about it before offline, where, if you, let's say somebody started their Treasury career in 2011 and then, middle of 2019 decided to take a little sabbatical, they missed out on 2 of the largest crises we've had globally. And now that person has, 8 years of experience, if I did my math right there. And though, you could have somebody who worked through 2008 to 2010, and, mid 2019 to now, that packs in literally years of experience into a lot less time. So again,
Yep.
keep kind of try to remember and keep into perspective what you're doing. That matters as well. Like Joe said, make sure you're highlighting that experience in your resume and pointing to it when you do reach out to a hiring manager directly, because again, we can pack in a lot of experience into a short period of time. So the number of years, that's why we always talk about how it shouldn't matter. And we, consistently tell the hiring managers we're working with, well, I should say, we just ask them to try to help them understand that it shouldn't matter as well. Anything else there before I get to one question we got from the audience here?
No, I think we've covered it.
All right, Joe, I'm going to pitch this one to you. It's always tough, right? Trying to do this in real time. So I'm going to read this before I haven't read it yet. So we'll see. Hopefully it's clear, but it's pretty long. Here we go. I have had a little negative feedback regarding not having a designation. I've had some mentors and treasurers say it does not matter, but a few HR and hiring departments said otherwise, usually if a CFO or non-treasury professional is hiring. So checking boxes, like you say, but I can see that they have not found anyone after a few months. So my many years of work experience not valued. have advised I will seek and write exam for the designations. Any tips on selling this better?
Selling the lack of a designation better, is that what we're looking at?
I think so. Yeah, I think that would be the summary of the yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to say because especially what you're going to find with if you can't have that conversation with people, or you're not having that conversation with an actual practitioner, you're talking to an HR professional or a CFO. There's a lot of ground that you have to cover, and it's almost like you have to really sell and focus on the experience that you do have. What I would do if I were you is educate yourself on what's covered in the CFA or what's covered in the CTP, and really, really know your ops experience, because that's as we talked about with Ask a Treasurer last Friday. What that does is that gives you the wide range of treasury experience. It gives you some instant credibility that shows you know what you're talking about in multiple disciplines within treasury. So if you have that experience, then you can almost kind of pick that apart. As long as you can get in front of somebody and actually have that conversation, you can pick it apart saying, look, the CTP covers A, B, and C. I've done this with A, this with B, this with C. And I'd argue that the certification pretty much becomes irrelevant at that point because you have the real world experience instead of book experience.
Yep, 100%. And like you say, Joe, the critical thing here, and for this specific question, obviously you are studying for the exam, so you have the textbook. You're working through it, as you just mentioned in your comment, which is great. So you have all that information, and so I think it's also probably a pretty good study guide to go through the entire textbook kind of outline. You can find it in the table of contents and just check the boxes yourself for what experience you have throughout your career, and you probably find that you have most of it. And of course, the areas that you don't, you're going to want to, for your own sake, focus on those, in getting that certification. So again, I think obviously it's there's a cost associated, but textbook is going to be a relatively small percentage of that total cost. And anybody, even if you don't want to take the exam, can go out and get that, and it wouldn't hurt to do.
Yeah, and then I guess that would be a good question if you did wind up speaking to them without the CTP, is would they be willing to pay for your CTP or your CFA as a part of it? If that's going to be a requirement for the position, then they say, look, I'm open to learning. I already have the experience. I just need the financial backing to take the test. Would you do that for me? And see what comes of that. I mean, show that you're serious about it. And it really just ties into that bigger theme that we talk about, where it's understanding where you're strong, where you have some gaps, but having a plan of attack for how you're going to cover those gaps so that people actually envision you in that role. And that's not lip service, right? Like anyone can say I'm a learner, a dedicated self-starter, whatever it may be. If you come into that interview knowing your own weaknesses and how you're going to tackle them, that says more than just saying, yep, I would have no problem starting my own thing. I mean, that's the proof's in the pudding there.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking the exact same thing. I mean, we talk about the soft skills, the traits or attributes or characteristics that one must possess, and one of the most common we see is that self-starter. Mm-hmm. And to your point, Joe, this can prove that you're a self-starter. And I love the idea of just saying that you're actively studying for the exam, but asking the company. You don't have anything to lose to ask the company if that's something they would cover for you when they hire you, and you're in process of getting that designation. So I think that covers two things in one right there. It proves you're self-starter, and it might help you a little bit more to get the designation. Yeah,
and even going back to the studying, the exam book piece, and everything that goes into that. I mean, those are the bullet points that you would probably want to include in your resume. Those responsibilities that you have too, just to show that, hey, I may not have that designation, but I certainly have the experience.
It tests your hiring manager. How well do they know the designation? Right?
It does. It absolutely does. So between the requirements and just knowing the general disciplines that are required for the CTP, I think you should have a pretty good plan of attack. And if they still don't want to talk to you at the end of the day, then hey, there are plenty of opportunities out there where a CTP isn't required. We've heard about it from countless Treasury leaders before. There's differing opinions on the value of the certification. I know I can insert myself in there and saying that you can't go wrong in investing in yourself, having that education. You'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. But if you don't have the financial means or you haven't had the time to do it, then that's how I would cover it if I were in your shoes.
Awesome. And yeah, appreciate the comments. It sounds like this was helpful. So happy to help. I don't see any additional questions at this point in time, so we can go back to our text-in questions, I think, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one more. How long do agencies typically have a right to represent once you are presented to a client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and the answer really, it does vary. So essentially what it is a right to represent at that given company. And I would say that the absolute minimum you will see in that case, depending on the contract, is going to be 3 months, and it can be up to 12 months. It's pretty rare that it's more than that. So yeah, that would be, my answer to that question is it very much depends, but it's something you should definitely ask the agency you're working with.
Definitely. I think that's a fair question to any agency recruiter. Good test of how well they know their own business and how well they know their own contracts. And you want to know what you're up against. I mean, if it's a situation where maybe you didn't get a role with XYZ company 3 months ago, but they have the right to represent for 12, all that's going to happen is if you go to apply directly, then they're going to notify that third-party recruiter anyway. So if you already have that relationship, I would focus, if you're going to be represented by a third-party recruiter, focus on that relationship piece. So many people I speak with, and you and I have both worked in the staffing world, where just like, yeah, I want this opportunity. I don't really care who it's through or anything like that. But this is how you get burned on the back end, is if you don't know that relationship, you don't fully understand that relationship. And I don't think a lot of job seekers put a whole lot of weight behind the contracts the contract relationship that takes place between a third party and a corporate client. Because you can get yourself into some pretty hairy situations without even realizing it when you just say, yes, go ahead and represent me for this role. So in terms of timelines, 3 months to a year is consistent with what I've seen in my experience too. And you had something else that you wanted to add?
Oh, just on that front of, it shouldn't, the most, the best of us are going to make sure we don't get in the way. But to your point, it's just like in anything, there's plenty of people out there who, whether it's inexperience or, bad faith, hopefully it's not that, but it can be, it can end up burning you on a given opportunity. So to your point, Joe, I think it's super important to understand, and it's something you want to ask. And I would imagine that we got that question based on someone's experience. So probably not a good experience. In the future, make sure you're asking, whomever it is that's telling you they're going to represent you. And on that note, I mean, I think if for whatever reason you think that there might be an opportunity, to revisit a certain role, probably the best thing to do is to re-engage with that agency initially before kind of trying to go directly to the client, especially if you haven't asked the question up front and you don't know what the terms are of that, right to represent.
Yeah, absolutely. If they represented you once, I would go back to them to see if they still have that relationship, because chances are if they're not working on that role or they don't have that relationship in place anymore, that contract is probably null and void. There's probably been some sort of notification one way or another of a canceled contract, and then you don't have to worry about the right to represent anyway. So you're good to go.
Yep. That's it. And I don't know, I'm over here like scrambling, wondering why all the comments that I was seeing come through on our live on the screen, I'm seeing at least, just disappeared. So perhaps somebody deleted their questions and comments. I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful that I'm not missing things at this point. But as of this moment, I don't have any additional comments, at least visible to me, or questions, I should say, from the audience. So I don't know, Joe, I think if we don't have any more text-in questions, maybe we'll wrap this up a little earlier today. What do you think?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine for me. And This is our time to you. If anyone does happen to watch this later, or you ask questions after we sign off, then we will answer them next week, or the week after. I mean, these are just questions that we receive all the time, and that we want to cover. And again, that's really why we answer, or we encourage people to ask questions, because there's a good chance that if you have that question, somebody else does. And this is supposed to be, I know it's a public environment, but it's a safe space at the same time, because you and we're just trying to help people find jobs and navigate this messed up hiring and recruiting process that exists out there. And it's not, again, not specific to Treasury. It's across all industries. I've seen it in IT. I've seen it in healthcare. It's certainly present in Treasury, but we're just drawing off of our experience and trying to provide the best advice that we can. So if there's nothing else, then we will see you next Monday on Ask a Treasury Recruiter. And just a quick call out. We do have our practitioner conversation on Wednesdays, and then we also have Ask a Treasurer, which is our Ask Me Anything format with treasurers on Fridays at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. So with that, Scotty, if there's nothing else, we'll cut everyone loose.
Yeah, nothing else other than a comment, just to appreciate that comment, making sure I knew that that wasn't user error on my part. But Joe, to your point, look forward to seeing everybody here on Wednesdays and Fridays, as well as, of course, Mondays moving forward. Thanks.